Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Foster. I'm a faculty at Thomas Jefferson University in our Department of Family and Community Medicine. Thank you for joining me this morning for my poster presentation, which is on the implementation and early assessment of areas of concentration curriculum at our residency program. So just a bit of background, nationwide, there's been an increasing desire by residents to obtain some focused expertise in areas within the scope of family medicine during their residency training. The areas of concentration curriculum, these are customized curricula to really enhance the resident education and really encourage their development of interest and expertise in a focused area within the background of generalism that we expect in our family medicine resident trainees. And so having an area of concentration would really allow residents to pursue some individualized training beyond the core training that we would expect that they would receive during their 3 years. However, not to the extent that they would in a year-long fellowship. We recognize that our Jefferson Family Medicine residents, they do have very diverse interests that are not entirely captured in a former curriculum that we had called the Underserved Care Track. This Underserved Care Track would cater to about 3 or 4 residents in each of the residency classes, the PGY2 and PGY3 year, and allow our residents to have some continuity experiences at some of our community partners. However, we recognize that this was not something that we would be able to allow all of our residents to have some experience with, and then additionally that may not necessarily be the goals of all of our resident trainees. And so we wanted to identify an opportunity that would give all of our residents some opportunity to do some focus training in something that they were passionate about. And so we implemented this in the 2019-2020 academic year. The residents were able to create tailored experiences. They would work with faculty to kind of design and self-drive their goals for the year. And then also would be an opportunity for us to encourage some scholarly products, whether that be lectures or papers or things of that nature, that would really help them as they're planning for their future scope of practice. So the purpose of my poster this morning is to just discuss some of our initial feedback from our pilot implementation for our areas of concentration curriculum, and talk a little bit about what our next steps are. So briefly, for our areas of concentration expectations in the spring of the 2018-2019 academic year, we proposed to our rising second and rising third years that they declare an area of concentration for the upcoming year. Residents were allowed to have some dedicated time during their outpatient rotation blocks that were kind of incorporated into the weekly schedule, depending on the rotation. Obviously, if they were on an inpatient block or doing something such as night float, they would not have some dedicated time. But for those opportunities or those blocks where we did have some flexibility, we were able to incorporate 1 or 2 half-day sessions during those weeks. In our residency curriculum, we do also have elective time for our residents. This area of concentration time did not have to be incorporated within those electives. They can be completely separate. Our residents were expected to have deliverables, which included having dedicated usage of their track time or their area of concentration time, meaning if they had a Thursday afternoon that was dedicated to have some of this longitudinal time, they needed to be able to explain to us what they did during that time, whether it was reading, whether it was shadowing in a specific clinic, whether it was using that time to write a lecture or collaborate with another faculty member on some papers. They also needed to meet with their advisors quarterly, and below I have a quick image of what our areas of concentration card looks like. Hopefully you'll be able to access this document after the video so that you can look at it more deliberately. And we wanted our residents to kind of complete this with their advisors. It had some questions about how you expect to use your time moving forward, how we think this area of concentration curriculum is benefiting you and helping you kind of clarify your career goals and or just gaining additional skills that would be beneficial to you as you move forward in your career. The residents were also expected in their second year to have a topic, a resident given lecture on a topic related to their area of concentration. In the third year, the residents were expected to give either their grand rounds or one of their other resident lectures related to their area of concentration. we encouraged our residents to have a scholarly product, whether it be a poster or publication, collaborating with their faculty mentors, considering doing op-eds, anything to that nature that would help our residents to gain some scholarly traction, and then also considering submitting to a regional or national meeting if we had a project that was appropriate. And our faculty was willing to support our residents to make it to those meetings if we could. So for this poster and this project, again, I did want to explain some of the feedback that we received from our trainees as well as some of our advisors who served as faculty mentors to our residents. So we gathered information in a number of different ways. We've had the updates from the residents during their quarterly meetings were all submitted. We also submitted Qualtrics surveys to both the senior residents and to our faculty advisors. And then lastly, our chief residents at the end of the year hold a curriculum feedback session, and the chiefs were able to identify some of the themes that were given related to the areas of concentration feedback for us as the faculty. So we did both qualitative and quantitative analysis of some of the feedback we received, specifically looking at the time that was allocated to the area of concentration. Again, it was allotted throughout the year. We wanted to assess whether this was enough or inadequate. The impact of the areas of concentration on future career planning, any of the successes, the challenges, and limitations of the areas of concentration as it currently exists, understanding the expectation of the role as a resident and or as a faculty member, and then any other feedback they may have about this curriculum. So some of our results, briefly, for the purpose of our poster, included some data. We did have some challenges with getting our survey completed. Of our 20 residents who were participating in the areas of concentration, we unfortunately only got about 8 to participate in the resident survey. And then of our faculty, we have about 11 faculty who serve as areas of concentration advisors, and unfortunately we only received 4 surveys. But just some of the themes that we identified in reviewing those reports. The residents felt that the time allotted for the areas of concentration was actually pretty decent. Some 63% felt just right. However, a few felt that it was too little time. None of the residents who completed the survey felt that the time allocated was too much. Some of the themes were that residents enjoyed having some dedicated scholarly time. It was helpful for career goal clarification. It allowed residents to have a more well-rounded experience. It opened up academic interest and allowed research, publications, and presentations. Some of the limitations were that for a few of the residents, it felt that they felt short on some educational experiences, secondary to limited access to some of the desired experiences, whether in the community or within our department. There were some challenges with scheduling. A lot of this was self-driven, and so if there were schedules that residents wanted, it may not have fit with the templates that were offered for the residency program. And then lastly, they provided some recommendations to incorporate more of the areas of concentration identified experiences that the residents were able to identify and include in their time as something that they wanted to incorporate more into the general curriculum for the residents. From the faculty, some of the feedback were there was a bit of feeling unclear about the roles of an advisor. Some felt that they had adequate time to communicate with their advisees. About 50% of the faculty who responded felt that they were able to have quarterly meetings. However, there were some challenges with scheduling some of those times. About 50% of the residents were able to, or faculty were able to collaborate with our residents on scholarly projects. And then about 50% of our faculty agreed that residents were able to achieve their educational goals. However, there were definitely some room for improvement in reviewing some of their responses. In regards to advisor satisfaction, this is something that I was very passionate about, making sure that our faculty felt that they were supported, and about 50% of the faculty who responded felt extremely satisfied with the experience and the role as an advisor. 25% felt neither, and 25% felt somewhat dissatisfied. And going into some of the reasons for that, I'll talk about shortly, but essentially having the time dedicated and or faculty support were areas that came out as themes. Now, the resident end of year feedback session, we did go through that, and overall, were similar to some of the concepts that were mentioned in the resident survey. Some of the other impressions that we received from the feedback session I'll talk about later, but essentially they were rather mixed reviews. And then faculty review of the areas of concentration update cards and some of the educational outcomes from the works that the residents participated in. We're still reviewing and in progress. So some conclusions, as I mentioned, impressions and satisfaction with the area of concentration curriculum varied rather broadly in reviewing some of the responses from our residents. I think a lot of this was unfortunately impacted by the availability and accessibility of some of the experiences because there were a number of different areas of concentration that varied pretty widely. We had some residents who were doing population health, some who were doing reproductive health, some who were doing sports med. A lot of that experience was driven from experiences that may have already existed in the curriculum, or faculty who had access to sports teams or clinics where residents would get some hands-on reproductive health. And so it really just depended on how easy it was to access some of those opportunities. And I think that that may have played a role in the um, resident satisfaction with their experience. Some other feedback in regards to mixed opinions, I think some of our residents are a little bit more self-learners and self-driven and really enjoyed having the autonomy, but then others wanted a bit more help with scheduling some of the experiences. And so I think that that may have played a role as well in the residents' impression and satisfaction with the curriculum. Some things that were very were especially prominent as feedback that we received was having deliverables that were proposed at the beginning of the curriculum really did aid the residents in producing some scholarly work, and just even hearing feedback from the residents in person, they really enjoyed having some of that dedicated time to really work and advance their scholarly CV. Um, and then some other conclusions, the faculty experience as advisor varied very somewhat broadly, and I think, again, similar to the experiences we mentioned with the residents, but also having dedicated time and being able to collaborate with the resident provided some challenges. Um, as with most individuals who are doing research during this time, there are a number of limitations, which I'll just start out with COVID. Obviously, there was COVID-19 pandemic's impact on our fourth quarter. So many of our experience for our residents from March on for this year were canceled, or our residents were pulled and deployed to other experiences. And so the residents unfortunately did not have as many experiences throughout the year or as much longitudinal contact with their advisors or with the community organizations or sites that they were participating in. And so I think that may have contributed to some of the dissatisfaction. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic right now, the area of concentration sessions that are templated in the schedule for next year has also been impacted. There are fewer opportunities because our residents, we do need to allow flexibility in the case that we need to deploy our residents for some of our COVID services and other experiences that would need coverage during this time. Some other limitations, I think we had to create and employ this curriculum rather quickly towards the end of our last academic year. And so our methods and our evaluations for how we were going to review some of the feedback were developed after we went live with the curriculum. And I think we could have had a bit more of a deliberate approach if we had thought about some of our, our methodology prior to launching the curriculum. Additionally, areas of concentration curriculum, in doing some background research, the curricula vary across different institutions, and so there were no single tool to kind of measure resident response or resident feedback or residents satisfaction with some of the experiences. And so we kind of had to create our own feedback tool, but ideally there would be something that's a bit more validated to kind of review our experiences. And then lastly, the low survey response rate. Both our resident and faculty survey had about a 40% response rate, which I think partly was impacted by, again, COVID fatigue, survey fatigue. A number of surveys by email can sometimes get lost or just may not necessarily be as proactive in wanting to complete. And so I suspect that there may be some bias also in the respondents. So something to kind of consider as we're considering our next steps with our curriculum for the following year. So thinking about our discussion, again, I think ease of access opportunities really helped aid in resident satisfaction and contribute to a positive experience for both our residents and our faculty. As I mentioned, we launched our curriculum rather quickly, and so we also didn't have the opportunity to include our stakeholders, such as our senior residents, some of our chief residents, and even our faculty who were serving as faculty advisorship, to get information about what would make this a easily achievable experience, and one that would provide the most support for our team members. And so I think thinking about how we can incorporate that will be important moving forward. And then lastly, several of our areas of concentration experiences and topics varied quite broadly. And so it would be difficult for us to make the experiences equal, but finding some way to kind of have equal ground in each of them so that the amount of work that our residents are putting into their different experiences are somewhat more relatable, as well as equal amount of support and or time spent across the board. So next steps, I'm hoping for this active 2021 academic year, getting some further faculty and resident input to really help create these learning objectives for each of the areas of concentration, being more deliberate about creating competency-based goals, looking at what some desired experiences are and supporting our residents in identifying and scheduling them, identifying CME opportunities. And now that we are living in a more virtual world, I think we might be able to accommodate more of our residents to participate in some CME opportunities, sharing their works, doing some presentations and proposals of that nature. And then allowing our residents and faculty to meet at least once before the end of the first quarter to really stabilize and have a plan for the remainder of the year. We're going to continue to review the feedback from last year, as well as the update cards that the residents submitted. And then also we're hoping to do a CV review of our graduates to see what identified areas potentially could have been a result of our areas of concentration, just to see how much it's impacted postgraduates. Some of the feedback that came from our residents included having more full day experiences. And so we're going to hope to include more of that into the residency template. We've been able to do that. And I think especially for those experiences that are offsite, having this opportunity to have a full day there without distractions is going to be really impactful. And then towards the end of the year, or in the near future, I apologize, in the near future, we're hoping to have a faculty development session to really discuss and both talk about what the roles are, as well as workshop what may improve the roles for our advisors in this upcoming year, what things are done that we can support them. I think will be really powerful to make this a sustainable and satisfactory experience for all of our faculty and our residents. And so I'm looking forward to this upcoming year. I feel free to email me if you have any questions or comments about my poster. My information will be up on the website, but for those who will need it, it's my first last name, so chris.foster@jefferson.edu. Thank you again for participating in my virtual poster session.